For decades, Europe lived with a simple belief. If a serious security crisis erupted, the United States would step in. Not maybe, not conditionally, automatically. That assumption is now being quietly dismantled in Washington. A new U.S. national security strategy has rewritten the rules of the transatlantic relationship, and behind its dry, bureaucratic language is a clear message. America still wants to lead, but it no longer treats Europe's security as an unlimited obligation. This is not a rhetorical shift. It is a structural one, because the moment security stops being automatic, deterrence weakens, alliances recalibrate, and entire regions are forced to confront risks they were never prepared to manage alone. Today, I want to explain what this shift really means for Europe, for NATO, and for the United States itself. And more importantly, whether this new approach is temporary or whether it marks a permanent change in how America defines its role in the world. When you read documents like this, it is a mistake to focus on individual phrases. What matters is the logic beneath them. And the logic here is a redesign of responsibility. For more than 30 years, the American model was simple. When a major crisis erupted, Washington filled the gap, sometimes because of direct interests, sometimes because of credibility, and sometimes simply because no one else could act fast enough. This model created what many allies came to see as the American security umbrella. Under that umbrella, defense spending was postponed, military modernization slowed, and security gradually became something outsourced rather than built. The new strategy signals a fundamental change. The umbrella still exists, but it is no longer open by default. This does not mean the United States is retreating from the world. It means the United States is choosing. And choosing means that some regions will receive more certainty, while others will receive less. Not because they're morally unimportant, but because they're no longer central to U.S. priorities under real constraints. This is not about isolation. It is about selectivity. America no longer wants allies who rely on permanent protection. It wants allies who carry real weight. Nowhere does this shift land harder than in Europe. European security was never only a military arrangement. It was also a psychological one. For 3 generations, Europeans lived with a background certainty. The United States would not allow Europe to fail. That certainty shaped policies, budgets, and public expectations. It allowed comfort. It allowed delay. And it allowed the belief that the system would always hold. Washington is now saying something fundamentally different. Security is not free, and it is not automatic. This forces Europe to confront questions it avoided for decades. How much risk are European societies willing to accept without an American backstop? How quickly can Europe build real military capacity, industrial scale production, logistics, air defense, ammunition? And most importantly, are European voters prepared to pay the price? Because defense spending is not an abstract number. It is a domestic political battle. It means higher taxes, more debt, or cuts elsewhere. It means trade-offs. And trade-offs create turbulence, especially in societies accustomed to long periods of stability. This new American strategy does not simply change Europe's security environment. It accelerates Europe's internal political stress. This brings us to NATO. NATO is often discussed as a military machine, but its real power is not hardware. NATO is a credibility system. Deterrence works only when adversaries believe the response is guaranteed. The moment commitments begin to look conditional, deterrence weakens, even if capabilities remain massive on paper. This is the hidden danger. When allies begin to wonder whether support is automatic, and adversaries begin to wonder whether it is negotiable, confidence erodes, and NATO depends on confidence more than on numbers. Strategic ambiguity inside an alliance is poison, because NATO is a promise, and promises fail not when tanks run out, but when belief disappears. The real question is no longer only about budgets or troop numbers. It is about whether American guarantees are still perceived as unconditional, or as subject to cost-benefit calculations during a crisis. Once that question enters public space, everyone recalculates. allies, adversaries, markets, voters. Ukraine is where this tension becomes most visible. Ukraine concentrates the hardest variables at once: resources, time, and political will. The old language spoke of support as long as it takes. The new logic sounds different. Conflicts cannot be supported indefinitely, as permanent obligations. This does not mean abandonment. It means Washington is reserving the right to decide what level of involvement is rational. That creates pressure in two directions. Pressure on Europe to carry more responsibility now, not someday. And pressure on Ukraine to adapt to shifting political realities, including the possibility of negotiated outcomes. For Eastern Europe, this uncertainty is existential, because for frontline states, uncertainty is not discomfort. It is fear. And there is another risk that is often underestimated. If Washington stops being the force that disciplines European unity, Europe may fragment into different strategies, different red lines, and different risk tolerances. That is how security systems destabilize, sometimes without a single shot fired on alliance territory. Now, let us be honest about the American side of this equation. This shift is not driven by ideology. It is driven by limits. The United States faces a real strategic constraint. You cannot maintain global commitments at Cold War levels, compete with China, modernize your own forces, and absorb domestic economic and political pressure, all at the same time. Even if America wanted to carry everything, it is becoming structurally harder. There is also a domestic reality: voter fatigue with endless commitments, endless spending, and conflicts that feel distant from everyday American life. What we are witnessing is not a mood. It is a recalculation. So will this policy survive a change in administration? The language would change. The tone would soften. There would be more talk of values, partnerships, and global order. But the constraints would remain: China, industrial limits, budget pressure, political fatigue. Different words, the same strategic math. So what is the conclusion? We are entering an era where security is not rented from a superpower. It is built by alliances willing to plan, pay, and take responsibility. This is a harder era, a less comfortable era, but also, in a strange way, a more honest one. Because the old illusion that someone will always come automatically is fading, and the new reality is simple. The future will be shaped not by promises, but by decisions. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.